My stepdaughter mocked my miscarriage to gain TikTok clout, spread edited photos of my unalived baby, and humiliated me publicly. So I laid the perfect trap and watched her lose everything she cared about. Dating Liam made me feel like a firework being shot into the night sky. He was everything any woman could ever wish for. On bad days, he didn't try to fix me. He just sat beside me, listening like the world would stop if he missed a word. He's the first one to ever make me feel like winning me wasn't the end of the game, but rather the beginning of a lifetime of choosing me every single day, including after marriage. So when I had missed my period 2 months in a row, I didn't feel worried, just excited. I knew it was the start of a new adventure, and everyone was excited for us too, except for his stepdaughter Lacey. Lacey was 14 by this point, and I was trying everything to get on her good side. I'd drive her to school instead of letting her take the bus, always buy her new stationery, and let her borrow my clothes without even asking. But the more I tried, the more she hated me. But I still kept being kind to her, because I wanted her to be a good sister to my baby. But 4 months later, I didn't have to worry about that anymore, because we had a miscarriage. My life turned gray after that. It felt like nothing mattered, because it didn't. Everything I had wished for, everything I had ever wanted, was ripped away from me for no reason. I walked around feeling like my womb was a coffin, and my days were all a blur. And while Liam tried to console me, Lacey tried to make my life worse, because during this time, Lacey was trying to build up a TikTok following to become an influencer. She would spend all day shoving her phone into my face at any given moment, trying to get me to open up about my experience in having a miscarriage online. At this point, I had taken some serious time off work because I couldn't get through a day without bawling my eyes out, so I told her no and asked her politely to please leave me alone. That's when Liam walked in. "Honey, you've been depressed for days now. Doesn't mean you have to drag Lacey down too." I stared at him in disbelief. Like, there was no way he just said that, but instead of laughing it off like I expected or apologizing, he just gave Lacey a knowing look. "Yeah, I'm not even asking for much," Lacey chimed in. The empty pit in my stomach grew bigger, and I wished for the ground to swallow me whole, but I settled for just turning the other way in bed and crying myself to sleep. I think something shifted after that. Liam stopped taking care of me as much, and Lacey actually gave me space, except I was too depressed to notice at the time. So when I went to look for my ultrasound photo, I expected to find it. It was all I had left of my baby girl, and sometimes, in the early days of grief, I'd look at it and even talk to it, tell her how much I love her, how much I want her back. But that day, I couldn't see it anywhere. I picked apart the house, thread by thread, until it was nothing but bones and dust. Every drawer, every cabinet, gutted and left gasping open. It was nowhere to be found. That's when I heard Lacey on the phone upstairs. I was so panicked that I didn't even knock, just walked in. What I saw in her hand made my eyes almost pop out of my head. It was my ultrasound, and she was taking photos of it. I grabbed her phone and went through her camera roll. She yelled at me to give it back, but I ignored her. I opened her camera roll and started scrolling through the photos. What I saw made me physically sick. She had taken photos of my ultrasound and photoshopped a devil baby over the image of my womb. In some of the pictures, the devil was holding what looked like poison, as if it was contaminating me. I kept scrolling and saw she'd sent these images to everyone, all her classmates, every group chat she was in. As I scrolled, she sat on the edge of her bed and even went a little red, but I just slowly walked out and didn't say a word. In fact, I didn't say anything for those next few days because I was planning something dark. And Lacey was about to finally realize what consequences for being a bratty beach looked like. I spent that whole night staring at Lacey's phone, scrolling through all the horrible messages and comments. There were hundreds of them. Some kids from her school actually encouraged her to make more edits. One girl named Brittany suggested Lacey should catch the stepmom crying on video for more content. Another boy wrote, "LOL, your stepmom sounds like a psycho baby killer." I couldn't believe what I was reading. I took screenshots of everything before deleting the photos from her phone. Then I put it on her desk while she was in the shower the next morning. She didn't say anything about it. I guess she figured I'd tell Liam, and she was waiting for the fallout, but I didn't tell him. Not yet. Instead, I started gathering information. I know that sounds weird and maybe a little psycho, but I needed ammunition. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. So I started paying more attention to Lacey's routines, her friends, her social media habits. I wasn't being creepy about it. I just observed from a distance. The first thing I noticed was that Lacey was obsessed with her TikTok follower count. She'd check it constantly, refreshing the app every few minutes like she was expecting some massive change. She had about 2,500 followers, not exactly influencer status, but enough to give her a taste of that attention she clearly craved. I also realized that Liam had no idea what his daughter was really like online. He thought her social media was just dance videos and makeup tutorials. He had no clue she was posting cruel content about me or anyone else. Classic clueless parent situation. After a few days of watching and waiting, I decided on my first move. Nothing too dramatic, just a small taste of what was coming. I changed our Wi-Fi password. That's it. Simple but effective. When Lacey got home from school and couldn't connect, she stomped around the house like a toddler having a tantrum. I was in the kitchen making dinner well, heating up frozen lasagna, when she stormed in. She demanded to know the new password. I just shrugged and told her I had no idea what she was talking about. She didn't believe me, of course. She called me a liar and said she needed the internet for homework. I pointed out that she had data on her phone if it was really for school. Lacey ran to Liam as soon as he got home. I heard her complaining from the other room, her voice high-pitched and whiny. Liam came into the kitchen looking confused. He asked me about the Wi-Fi and I put on my most innocent face. I told him I'd been having trouble with it too and had called the provider. They said there was an outage in our area that should be fixed by tomorrow. Complete BS, but he bought it. Lacey didn't though. She glared at me from behind Liam's back and I just gave her a tiny smile. Game on, kid. The next day, I fixed the Wi-Fi while they were both out. When Lacey got home and discovered it was working again, she looked at me suspiciously but didn't say anything. That night, I heard her talking to Liam, asking if they could change the Netflix password because she thought I was messing with her watch list. I wasn't, but I liked that she was getting paranoid. Over the next week, I did little things to mess with her. Nothing major, just enough to keep her on edge. I'd move her things around slightly. Her favorite hoodie would mysteriously end up in the laundry when she wanted to wear it. The almond milk she liked for her cereal would be empty when she went to use it. Petty stuff, I know, but it was just the beginning. Meanwhile, I started acting super normal around Liam. I showered regularly again, put on makeup, cooked dinner a few times. I even suggested we go out for date night. He seemed relieved that I was getting better after the miscarriage. Little did he know I was just setting the stage. During this time, I also started gathering more concrete evidence of Lacey's online behavior. I created a fake account on TikTok and followed her. Then I made another one and did the same. Through these accounts, I could see everything she posted without her knowing it was me watching. What I found was worse than I expected. The devil baby ultrasound wasn't a one-time thing. She had a whole series of posts mocking me. In one video, she pretended to be me crying over a doll, then threw the doll in the trash while laughing. In another, she used a sound clip about toxic stepmoms and showed pictures of me from behind when I wasn't aware she was filming. She never showed my face or used my name, but it was obviously about me. The comments on these videos were brutal. Kids can be so effing cruel. They called me all sorts of names, made jokes about my miscarriage, suggested ways Lacey could get revenge on me for supposedly ruining her life. And Lacey ate it up, responding with laughing emojis and adding her own nasty comments. I downloaded all of these videos and saved the comments. Evidence, ammunition, whatever you want to call it. By this point, about 2 weeks had passed since I found the ultrasound in her room. I was still doing my small acts of psychological warfare, nothing that could be proven, just enough to make her paranoid. But I needed to step things up. My opportunity came when Liam mentioned he had to go out of town for a business trip, 3 days in Chicago for some conference. He seemed worried about leaving me alone with Lacey, given how fragile I'd been. I assured him I was much better now and that Lacey and I would be fine. The night before he left, I made a big show of how much I'd miss him. I cooked his favorite meal, wore that blue dress he likes, the whole 9 yards. Lacey watched us from across the dinner table, pushing her food around and rolling her eyes whenever Liam wasn't looking. After Liam went to bed, I stayed up late planning. I needed to make these 3 days count. I wanted Lacey to understand exactly how it felt to have something precious taken from you, to be mocked and humiliated when you're already at your lowest point. The next morning, I drove Liam to the airport. On the way back, I stopped at the mall and bought a new outfit, something completely different from my usual style. Black jeans, a band t-shirt I'd never heard of, and a pair of chunky boots. I also picked up some temporary hair dye, a dark purple color. If I was going to infiltrate Lacey's world, I needed to blend in. When I got home, Lacey was still at school. I went straight to work transforming myself. I dyed the ends of my hair purple, put on the new clothes, and even added some eyeliner. I looked like a completely different person, definitely not the boring stepmom Lacey always complained about. Then I set up my fake TikTok account with a new profile picture, me in my new look, but with a filter that made me look younger and obscured my face enough that Lacey wouldn't recognize me. I spent the afternoon studying the way Lacey's friends talked online, the slang they used, the things they were into. By the time Lacey got home from school, I was back in my normal clothes with my hair pulled back in a bun to hide the purple ends. I acted completely normal, asking about her day and telling her I'd ordered pizza for dinner since Liam was gone. She seemed suspicious of my sudden niceness, but didn't say anything. After dinner, I waited until she was in her room with her door closed before putting my plan into action. I changed back into my cool outfit, let down my purple-tipped hair, and started filming TikToks. I didn't mention Lacey directly. Instead, I made videos about a mean girl at my school who bullied people online. I used the same kind of editing style Lacey used, the same music, the same hashtags. I even referenced some inside jokes from her friend group that I'd picked up from stalking their accounts. Then I started following all of Lacey's friends from my fake account. I commented on their videos, being super supportive and friendly. Within hours, most of them followed me back. By midnight, I had almost 200 followers, including several of Lacey's closest friends. The next morning, I posted another video. This one was more specific. I talked about how this mean girl made fun of someone who had a miscarriage. I still didn't name Lacey, but anyone who knew her would be able to connect the dots. I ended the video by asking if I should expose this girl's behavior. The comments flooded in. People were outraged. They wanted to know who this horrible person was. Some of Lacey's own friends commented things like, "I think I know who you're talking about," and "Spill the tea, sis." I kept my normal routine with Lacey that day, made her breakfast, offered to drive her to school, acted like nothing was happening. She was still suspicious, but seemed almost relieved that my revenge was apparently just being annoyingly nice to her. Little did she know what was brewing online. By the time she got home from school, my fake account had over 500 followers, and my videos about the mean girl had thousands of views. I could tell something was up because she spent the entire evening in her room on her phone, and I heard her voice getting increasingly agitated as she talked to someone. That night, I posted the final video in my series. I still didn't name Lacey, but I showed a blurred screenshot of the Devil Baby ultrasound edit. I talked about how hurtful it was to the woman who had lost her baby. I asked my new followers if they thought this kind of behavior was okay, if this was the kind of person they wanted to support online. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People were disgusted. They started unfollowing Lacey in droves. Some even went to her page and left comments calling her out. By morning, she had lost almost half her followers. When Lacey woke up and checked her phone, I heard her scream from her bedroom. She came running downstairs, face red with anger and embarrassment. She accused me of ruining her life. I just looked confused and asked what she was talking about. She shoved her phone in my face, showing me the comments on her latest video. People calling her a bully, a psycho, saying they were unfollowing her. Some even threatened to tell their parents or school counselors about what she'd done. I kept my cool. I just shrugged and said it looked like her actions were catching up with her. She screamed that I had no proof it was her, that I couldn't prove anything. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd taken from her phone that night. The Devil Baby edits, the cruel comments, all of it. Her face went pale. She hadn't realized I'd kept receipts. She started backpedaling, saying it was just a joke, that she didn't mean anything by it. I asked her if she thought my miscarriage was funny, if she thought losing a baby was a joke. For the first time, I saw real shame on her face. Not embarrassment at being caught, but actual shame for what she'd done. It only lasted a moment before the anger came back, but I saw it. She stormed back upstairs and slammed her door. I heard her crying, but I didn't feel bad. Not after what she'd done. This was just the beginning. That afternoon, I took things a step further. I contacted the parents of some of Lacey's friends. Not all of them, just the ones who had been most active in encouraging her behavior. I sent them screenshots of their kids' comments about my miscarriage, about how they thought it was hilarious that I lost my baby. The responses started coming in within hours. Horrified apologies from parents who had no idea what their kids were saying online. Promises to address the behavior. One mom even called me in tears, saying she couldn't believe her daughter would say such horrible things. By dinner time, Lacey's phone was blowing up with messages from friends whose parents had confiscated their phones or grounded them. She knew it was me, but she couldn't prove it. I hadn't mentioned her name to any of the parents. I'd just shown them what their own kids had written. That night, Lacey tried a different approach. She came to me in tears, apologizing for the ultrasound thing, said she didn't realize how hurtful it was, that she was just trying to be funny. She begged me not to tell Liam when he got home tomorrow. I listened to her apology without expression. When she finished, I just asked one question. Are you sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? She didn't have an answer for that. She just stared at me, tears still streaming down her face. I told her I'd think about not telling Liam, but that I needed time to consider whether her apology was genuine. The truth was, I had no intention of telling Liam. Not yet, anyway. This was between Lacey and me. I wanted her to sweat it out, to worry about what I might do next. The final day of Liam's trip, I decided to go for the kill shot. I knew Lacey had been working on a video application for some influencer program that could get her sponsored content and actual money. She'd been talking about it for weeks before all this happened. The deadline was today. While she was at school, I found the video on her laptop. It was actually pretty good. She'd clearly put a lot of work into it. I didn't delete it. That would be too obvious. Instead, I opened it and made some tiny changes. I adjusted the audio so it was slightly out of sync with the video. I added a barely noticeable jump cut in the middle of her main talking point. Little things that made the video look unprofessional, but wouldn't be immediately obvious to her when she did a quick review before submitting. When she got home from school, she went straight to her room to finalize her application. I heard her working on it, playing the video back several times. She didn't notice the issues I'd created. They were subtle enough that she'd need to watch carefully to catch them. I heard her hit submit around 6 p.m. She came downstairs looking relieved and actually smiled at me for the first time in weeks. She told me her application was in and and that she was really proud of it. I smiled back and told her I was sure she'd done a great job. The guilt hit me then, seeing her so happy and hopeful. For a moment, I questioned what I was doing. Was I becoming just as bad as her? Was I stooping to the level of a teenage girl? But then I remembered the devil baby edit, the cruel comments, the way she'd tried to exploit my grief for internet fame. The guilt faded. Liam came home late that night. He was tired from his trip, but happy to see us both. He commented on how well we seemed to be getting along, how the house wasn't a war zone like he'd feared. If only he knew. The next few days were surprisingly calm. Lacey was anxiously waiting to hear back about her influencer application, and I was taking a break from my revenge to regroup and plan my next move. I even started feeling a little better about the miscarriage. Not over it. I'd never be over it. But the sharp, constant pain had dulled to a more manageable ache. Then Lacey got the email. I was in the kitchen when I heard her scream from her room. Not an angry scream this time, a devastated one. She came running downstairs, laptop in hand, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. She shoved the laptop at me. On the screen was an email from the influencer program. They were rejecting her application because of technical issues with the submission video and concerns about online behavior. They included screenshots of her TikTok posts mocking my miscarriage, the ones I thought had been deleted. I felt a cold shock run through me. This wasn't my doing. I'd messed with her video, yes, but I hadn't sent anyone those screenshots. Someone else had reported her. Lacey was hysterical, accusing me of ruining her one chance at a career. I denied it, truthfully for once, but she didn't believe me. She called me a beach, said I'd never be her real mom, that she hated me and always would. Liam came home in the middle of her meltdown. He looked between us, confused and concerned. Lacey immediately ran to him, showing him the rejection email but conveniently scrolling past the part about her online behavior. Liam tried to comfort her, telling her it was just one opportunity and there would be others. That's when Lacey dropped the bomb. She told him I'd been sabotaging her for weeks, changing the Wi-Fi password, messing with her things, turning her friends against her. I denied it all, of course. Some of it was true, but not all of it. I hadn't sent those screenshots to the influencer program. I hadn't told her friends to unfollow her. That had happened organically once people realized what kind of person she was. Liam looked at me with suspicion in his eyes. He asked if we could talk privately. I followed him to our bedroom, heart pounding. This wasn't how I wanted things to go down. Once the door was closed, he turned to me with a look I'd never seen before. He asked me straight out if I'd been messing with Lacey. I started to deny it, but something in his expression stopped me. He didn't believe me. And why should he? Lacey was his daughter. I was just the wife who'd been acting weird since losing the baby. So I changed tactics. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots, the devil baby edits, the cruel comments, the videos mocking my grief, all of it. His face went through a series of emotions as he scrolled through the evidence: disbelief, shock, anger, disappointment. Finally, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. He apologized for not believing me, for not seeing what Lacey was really like online. He said he had no idea she could be so cruel. Then he asked if I'd really been sabotaging her in return. I admitted to some of it: the Wi-Fi password, the small annoyances, the fake TikTok account. I didn't mention messing with her application video. That felt like a step too far to confess. Liam sat down heavily on the bed. He looked exhausted suddenly, like the weight of everything was crushing him. He said he didn't know what to do, how to handle this. Lacey was still his daughter, but what she'd done was inexcusable. I sat next to him and took his hand. I told him I understood she was his daughter, and that I didn't expect him to choose between us. I just wanted her to understand that actions have consequences, that she couldn't treat people that way without repercussions. He nodded slowly, then stood up. He said he needed to talk to Lacey alone. I agreed, though part of me was afraid of what she might say to him, how she might twist things to make herself the victim again. I stayed in our room while they talked in hers. I could hear their voices through the wall, his low and serious, hers high and defensive, then breaking into sobs. The conversation lasted over an hour. When Liam finally came back, he looked drained but resolute. He told me he'd shown Lacey the screenshots, made her understand that he knew everything she'd done. He said she'd eventually broken down and admitted to it all, plus other things I hadn't even known about. Apparently, she'd been the one who took my ultrasound photo in the first place. It hadn't been misplaced. She'd stolen it from my nightstand drawer specifically to make those edits. She'd also been reading my private journal, where I'd written about my grief over losing the baby. Liam said he'd grounded her indefinitely. No phone except for emergencies. No social media. No friends over. He'd also arranged for her to start therapy next week to address whatever was causing this behavior. I asked if she'd said anything about why she did it. Liam sighed and ran a hand through his hair. He said Lacey had admitted she was jealous of the baby, afraid of being replaced. When I lost the pregnancy, she saw how devastated I was, and it made made her feel even more insignificant, like I cared more about a baby I'd never even met than I did about her. It was twisted logic, but I could almost understand it from the perspective of an insecure teenager. Almost. That night, I lay awake thinking about everything that had happened. My revenge had worked in a way, but not how I'd planned. The truth had come out, but at what cost? Liam was hurt, Lacey was devastated, and I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected, just emptiness. The next morning, I made a decision. I knocked on Lacey's door and asked if we could talk. She was sitting on her bed, eyes red from crying, looking smaller and younger than I'd ever seen her. I sat down across from her and told her I knew why she'd done what she did, that I understood feeling replaced, feeling like you don't matter. I told her about my own childhood, about my parents divorcing and my dad starting a new family that didn't include me, how I'd acted out in similar ways, hurting people before they could hurt me. I didn't excuse what she'd done. I made it clear that her actions were cruel and had caused me real pain during the worst time of my life. But I also told her that I was willing to start over if she was, that maybe we could try to understand each other better. She didn't say much, just nodded occasionally and wiped away tears. When I finished talking, she looked up at me with those same eyes as Liam's and said something I never expected to hear. "I'm sorry about your baby. I really am." It wasn't much, but it was a start. A tiny crack in the wall between us. I left her room feeling lighter somehow. The grief over losing my baby was still there, would always be there. But the dark, consuming need for revenge had lifted. In its place was something fragile but hopeful, the possibility that something good might come from all this pain. That afternoon, I deleted my fake TikTok account and all the screenshots except one, the original ultrasound photo, which I printed out and put back in my nightstand drawer. Some things are worth keeping, even when they hurt to look at. Liam came home early that day. He found me in the kitchen starting dinner, something I hadn't done since before the miscarriage. He wrapped his arms around me from behind and just held me for a long moment. "Are we going to be okay?" he whispered against my hair. I turned in his arms and looked up at him, the man I'd fallen in love with, the man who'd failed me when I needed him most, but who was trying to make things right now. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I want to try." And I meant it. I wanted to try to forgive Lacey, to rebuild my relationship with Liam, to find a way forward that didn't involve more pain and revenge. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a soft knock at our bedroom door. Lacey stood there looking uncertain. She held out her hand. In it was a small box. "I made this," she said quietly. "You don't have to take it. I wanted to do something." I opened the box. Inside was a tiny charm bracelet. One of the charms was a small rose, the name we'd chosen for our baby. I looked up at Lacey, surprised. She explained that she'd made it in art class, that she thought maybe I'd want something to remember the baby by, something I could wear. It was clumsy and obviously made by an amateur, but it was also one of the most thoughtful things anyone had done for me since the miscarriage. I slipped it on my wrist without saying anything, not trusting myself to speak. Lacey nodded once, then turned to go. At the door, she paused. "I really am sorry," she said again, not looking back at me, "for everything." After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, running my fingers over the rose charm. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was a beginning. A real one this time. And sometimes, that's enough. My stepdaughter mocked my miscarriage, and now I'm planning my revenge. Conclusion. The next morning, I woke up with the bracelet still on my wrist. I stared at it for a long time, running my thumb over the little rose charm. It was a sweet gesture, but I wasn't ready to fully trust Lacey yet. One bracelet doesn't erase months of torment. Liam noticed it during breakfast and raised his eyebrows. I just shrugged and changed the subject. I wasn't ready to talk about it with him either. Things between us were still tense. He'd failed me when I needed him most, and that's not something you just get over overnight. Lacey came down for breakfast looking like she hadn't slept. She mumbled a quiet morning and grabbed some cereal. The three of us ate in awkward silence. It was like we were all walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing. After breakfast, Liam announced he was taking Lacey to her first therapy appointment. He asked if I wanted to come along, but I declined. I needed some time alone to think. Once they left, I wandered into the nursery. I hadn't been in there since the miscarriage. Liam had offered to clear it out, but I couldn't bear the thought of erasing all evidence of our baby girl, so the room had just sat there, door closed, like a shrine to what could have been. I pushed the door open slowly. Everything was exactly as we'd left it. The yellow walls, the white crib, the stuffed animals lined up on a shelf. I sat in the rocking chair and let myself cry for a while. When I finally pulled myself together, I made a decision. I grabbed some boxes from the garage and started packing things up. Not everything. I kept the blanket my mom had knitted and a few of the stuffed animals, but the rest needed to go. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I needed to move forward. By the time Liam and Lacey got home, I'd packed up most of the nursery. Liam found me sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes. He didn't say anything, anything, just sat down next to me and put his arm around my shoulders. "How was therapy?" I asked, leaning into him despite myself. "Intense," he replied. "The therapist wants to see all three of us next time." I tensed up immediately. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "I get it," he said, "but maybe it would help, for all of us." I didn't answer. Instead, I asked him to help me move the boxes to the garage. We worked in silence, carrying out the physical remnants of our hopes and dreams. Lacey watched from the hallway but didn't offer to help. I didn't blame her. This wasn't her burden to carry. That night, I lay awake thinking about the therapy suggestion. Part of me wanted to refuse. Why should I have to sit in a room and talk about my feelings with the girl who had mocked my deepest pain? But another part of me knew that if we were ever going to move past this, we needed help, professional help. The next morning, I told Liam I'd go to therapy with them, just one session, to see how it went. He looked relieved and squeezed my hand across the breakfast table. The family therapy session was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, things at home remained tense but civil. Lacey stayed in her room most of the time, only coming out for meals. Liam tried too hard to act normal, filling the silence with forced cheerfulness that grated on my nerves. I spent a lot of time out of the house. I went back to work, grateful for the distraction. I started taking long walks in the evenings, just to have some space to breathe. I even met up with a friend for coffee, the first social thing I'd done since the miscarriage. The day of the therapy session arrived too quickly. I almost backed out, sitting in the car outside the therapist's office with my heart racing, but I forced myself to go in. For myself, if nothing else. The therapist was a middle-aged woman named Dr. Chen with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She started by laying out some ground rules. No interrupting, no personal attacks, everyone gets a chance to speak. Liam went first, talking about how helpless he'd felt after the miscarriage, how he hadn't known how to support me and had ended up failing both me and Lacey in different ways. He cried a little, which surprised me. I'd only seen him cry once before, when we lost the baby. Then it was Lacey's turn. She stared at her hands the whole time, speaking so quietly we had to lean forward to hear her. She talked about feeling invisible after her mom left, about how Liam had been her whole world. Then I came along, and suddenly she had to share him. When we got pregnant, she felt like she was being replaced, like she didn't matter anymore. "I know it was wrong," she said, finally looking up at me. "What I did with the ultrasound and everything. I was just so angry and scared. I wanted to hurt you like I was hurting. I'm really sorry." It was my turn next. I took a deep breath and told them how excited I'd been about the baby, how devastated I was when we lost her, how betrayed I felt when Liam took Lacey's side that day, how finding those edited photos had broken something inside me that I wasn't sure could be fixed. I wanted revenge, I admitted. I wanted Lacey to hurt as much as I was hurting, and I'm not proud of that, but it's the truth. Dr. Chen nodded and asked me if I thought my revenge had helped me feel better. "No," I said after a moment. "It just made me feel empty." The rest of the session was Dr. Chen helping us understand each other's perspectives. She didn't excuse Lacey's behavior, but explained that teenagers often lack impulse control and empathy. She told Liam he needed to step up as a parent and be more aware of what his daughter was doing online. And she told me that my grief was valid, but using it as a weapon would only hurt me more in the long run. We left the session emotionally drained, but with a tiny bit more understanding. Dr. Chen gave us some communication exercises to practice at home and scheduled another session for the following week. That night, Lacey knocked on our bedroom door again. This time, she had her laptop with her. She asked if she could show me something. I hesitated, but eventually nodded. She opened her laptop and pulled up her TikTok account. She'd posted a new video, her first since everything went down. In it, she was sitting on her bed, looking directly at the camera. "I messed up," she said in the video. "I did something really cruel to someone who was already suffering, and I'm ashamed of myself. I'm not naming names or giving details because this isn't about getting attention or sympathy. It's about owning up to my mistakes. If you've ever bullied someone or laughed at someone else's pain, please stop and think about the damage you're causing. It's not funny or cool. It's just cruel." The video had thousands of views already. The comments were mostly supportive, praising her for taking responsibility. Some of her former friends had even commented, admitting they'd been wrong to encourage her behavior. I looked at Lacey, genuinely surprised. "You didn't have to do that," she shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Yeah, I did. Dr. Chen said part of making amends is publicly acknowledging when you've hurt someone, especially if you hurt them publicly. It wasn't a magical fix. One apology video didn't erase everything that had happened, but it was a real step in the right direction." Over the next few weeks, we continued with therapy, both family sessions and individual ones. Slowly, painfully, we started to rebuild. Liam became more present, more aware of both my needs and Lacey's. Lacey started making an effort to connect with me in small ways, asking about my day, helping with dinner without being asked, giving me space when I needed it. I found myself thawing toward her bit by bit, not forgiving exactly, not yet, but opening up to the possibility that we might eventually find a way forward. One evening about a month after that first therapy session, I was cooking dinner when Lacey came into the kitchen and asked if she could help. I gave her some vegetables to chop. We worked side by side in comfortable silence for a while. Then she spoke up. "I found something online I thought might help you. It's a support group for women who've had miscarriages. They meet at the community center on Thursdays." I nearly cut my finger in surprise. "Oh, thanks. I'll look into it. I could go with you," she offered hesitantly. "If you want, or not, whatever you prefer." The old me would have immediately rejected the offer, but I was trying to be better, to meet her halfway. "Maybe. Let me think about it." She nodded and went back to chopping carrots. I did end up going to the support group, though I went alone the first time. It was both harder and more helpful than I expected. Being in a room full of women who understood exactly what I was going through was incredibly powerful. I cried through most of the meeting, but for once, they were healing tears. I went back the next week, and the week after that. The third time, I let Lacey come with me. She sat quietly in the back, just listening. Afterward, she didn't say much, just squeezed my hand on the drive home. Liam noticed the change between us. He commented on it one night as we were getting ready for bed. "You two seem better," he said cautiously. "We're working on it," I replied. And we were. It wasn't perfect. We still had bad days. Days when the grief would hit me like a truck, and I'd retreat into myself. Days when Lacey would fall back into her defensive teenage attitude. Days when Liam would say the wrong thing and set us both off. But we were trying. All three of us. About 3 months after everything went down, I found myself standing in the empty nursery again. We'd moved all the boxes to a storage unit, but we hadn't decided what to do with the room itself. It felt wrong to just turn it into a guest room or home office. Lacey found me there, staring at the yellow walls. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Just wondering what to do with this space," I said. She was quiet for a moment, then suggested, "What about a memorial? Not like a sad shrine or anything, but maybe a reading nook or something. Somewhere peaceful where you can go to remember her." I looked at her, surprised again by her insight. "That's actually a really good idea." She shrugged, but I could tell she was pleased. "I could help, if you want. I'd like that," I said, and meant it. We spent the next few weekends transforming the room together. We painted over the yellow with a soft blue. We put in a comfortable window seat with bookshelves on either side. We hung some simple artwork, nothing baby-related, just peaceful landscapes. In one corner, we placed a small table with a vase for fresh flowers. The only explicit acknowledgement of what the room had been meant for was a small wooden box on one of the shelves. Inside, I kept the ultrasound photo, the bracelet Lacey had made me, and a few other mementos. Not hidden away, but not the focus either. The day we finished the room, all three of us stood in the doorway admiring our work. Liam put his arms around both of us, and for once, it didn't feel forced or awkward. It felt like family. That night, I sat alone in the new space, thinking about everything that had happened, the baby we'd lost, the pain and cruelty that followed, the slow, difficult path to healing we were still walking. I ran my fingers over the rose charm on my bracelet, thinking about the daughter I never got to meet. I would always miss her, always wonder who she might have been, but I was starting to understand that her brief existence had changed all of us in ways we were only beginning to comprehend. Lacey and I would never have a perfect mother-daughter relationship. There was too much history, too much pain between us for that, but we were building something new, something based on hard-earned understanding and respect. It wasn't what I'd imagined when I married Liam, but it was real, and maybe that was enough. As for Liam and me, we were finding our way back to each other, slowly, with a lot of honest conversations and some painful revelations. Our marriage wasn't the same as it had been before the miscarriage. It was more complicated, more weathered, but also deeper in some ways, more authentic. I heard a soft knock and looked up to see Lacey standing in the doorway. "Dinner's ready," she said. "Dad ordered pizza." "I'll be right there," I replied. She hesitated, then added, "Is it okay? The room, I mean. Is it helping?" I looked around at what we'd created together. Not a nursery, not anymore, but not a shrine to grief either. Just a quiet space where healing could happen. "Yeah," I said. "It's helping." She nodded and turned to go. I followed her out, closing the door gently behind me, not locking it away, just moving forward, one day at a time.